Lamites, we're towards the top of Lamites Amid Beis. Tanya. So what we're discussing over here is the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. So the Mishnah said that according to Rabbi Yehuda, the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah is considered to be two different Kedushas. It's a Sveika de Yaima. So you can have an Eiruvin on one day in one direction, other day in the other direction. You can, and the next thing the Gemara will discuss right now is regarding taking Truma on Rosh Hashanah, and you could do it with a condition. If today is Yom Tov, tomorrow is Chayil. If tomorrow is Yom Tov, today is Chayil. The Gemara describes how you make this condition. It's the beginning of a line. Tanya, we learned in the Braisa. Keitzad Omer Rabbi Yehuda, Masna Adam al Kalkala b'Yom Tov Rishon v'Oichle b'Sheni. So how do you do this when you make this condition on a basket of fruits on the Yom Tov Rishon, and then you're able to eat it on Yom Tov Sheni? So usually to separate Truma is a shvus. You're not allowed to. So how do you do this? You have two baskets of produce, which is tevel. So what he says is as follows: on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, if today is not Yom Tov, today is a weekday, and tomorrow is really the Yom Tov, so then tehezu truma al zu. So what's in this basket should be truma, and what's on the other basket. But if today is Yom Tov and tomorrow is a weekday, what I said is nothing. So that's the condition. And then the Kaira Le Hashem, he says the name of Truma, he calls the name of Truma on what he wants to establish as Truma. But Umanicha, he has to leave it, he can't eat it yet. He doesn't know if it took effect. Ulamachar, it comes tomorrow. So now, Hu Aymer, he says the same thing. Ima Yom Chayil, if today is a weekday, so then Tehezu Truma Zu. So then it should be Truma. V'ma Yom Kaidish, and if today is Yom Tov, so then Ein B'dvarai Klum. What I'm saying now is going to be nothing. And now v'koyra le'Hashem, you established a truma, and v'oichla, and now you can eat it because b'manav shach, it's going to be truma. That's Rabbi Yehuda's shitta. Rabbi Yosi oiser. Rabbi Yosi says, no, you can't do this. This is the Rabbanon of the Mishnah, as the Gemara already said before. The Chachamim of the Mishnah is Rabbi Yosi that says that it's one long kedusha both days, and you can't make this condition. Then the Braisa adds, v'chein haya Rabbi Yosi oiser b'shnei yamim tovim shel galiyos. Similarly, not only regarding Rosh Hashanah, but regarding all Yomim Tovim Shel Galiyos, where there's a Sveika de Yom and you keep 2 days, Rabbi Yosi also said that you can't make this condition. Now that's difficult to understand. When you get to Rosh Hashanah, the Gemara before explained that there's a Svara, that Chachamim were Mesakin, that the Kedushas of both days should have a status of a Vadai. So the source of it is a suffix, but Chachamim made a takana, it should be a vadai. So it could be like one big kedusha. But why? What's the benegay to any other yom tov? It's a sveika de yaima. So why can't you make this condition? So the Gemara is soon going to say, let's see, that really Rav Yosi did not say this benegay to all other yomim tovim. First, the Gemara brings a story. Hahu bar tavya, there was a deer meat, the asa, the lebei reish galusa, or bar tavya is not, it's not meat yet. It's a deer. A deer that was brought to the Reish Galusa, the Itzid b'Yom Tov Rishon, Shel Galiyos. And it was captured by Goyim. Tzeda is not a malacha that's allowed in Yom Tov. There are malachas Eichel Nefesh that are allowed. Tzeda is not one of them. So it was captured from Goyim on the first day of Yom Tov. And then, v'ishtachit b'Yom Tov Sheni. It was shechted on the second day of Yom Tov. That's what happened. What happened now? Rav Nachman v'Rav Chisda achlu. Rav Nachman and Rav Chisda ate from this meat. Rav Sheishes lo yachal. Rav Sheishes didn't eat. Rav Nachman, so Rav Nachman said, "My avad leila Rav Sheishes de lo yachal bisra de tavia." What should I do? Rav Sheishes is not eating this meat. Why isn't he eating it? So Rashi here explains why did Rav Nachman and Rav Chisda eat it? Because mimonav shach, there's no problem here. If the day that it was captured on the first day of Yom Tov was chayil, so then what's the problem? They can eat shechted on the next day. Shchita is a malacha that's mutter on Yom Tov. And if when they captured it on the first day of Yom Tov, it was actually a Yom Tov, and the goyim did the malacha for a yid, what's the halacha if a guy does a malacha for a yid on Shabbos or on Yom Tov? The next day, which is a chayil, yeah, you're allowed to use it. You just have to wait b'chdei sheyasu, as long as it would take to do this malacha. But they waited. They shechted, and the next day they waited, and they were able to eat it. So what's the issue of eating this? It's a sveika de yaima. So either way, you can eat it. So what are we going to do with Rav Sheishes? Why didn't he eat it? Amalei Rav Sheishes, so Rav Sheishes said, "Veheichi echol." And how could I eat this meat? The Tani Isi said, "Va'amri lam," and others say that he said it with a more of a stronger tone. Isi Tani. Isi said something, and how are you ignoring this? What did he say? Rabbi Yosi said that in the 2 Yamim Tovim of Galias, you can't make a cheshbon and say that it's only a suffix, and yesterday was chayil, and today was kodesh, or maybe today is chayil, and yesterday was kodesh. You can't make this cheshbon. So therefore, since it was captured by the Goyim yesterday, and it's one long kedusha, can't eat it yet. Amar Rave, so Rave says, Umay kushya. What's the question from what Rabbi Yosi said? Maybe Rabbi Yosi meant something else. Dilme hachika amar. Maybe this is what Rabbi Yosi meant to say. V'chein haya Rabbi Yosi oiser b'shnei yamim tovim shel Rosh Hashanah b'goyla. Rabbi Yosi was adding, not benegay to all Yamim Tovim, benegay to Rosh Hashanah in Galos, that not only Rosh Hashanah in Eretz Yisrael do I say that it's considered to be one long day, even Rosh Hashanah in Galos is also considered to be one long day. Maybe that's what he meant to say. Right? Because really there's a difference. In Eretz Yisrael, in the Beis HaMikdash, over there the Chachamim made the takana because of in the Beis HaMikdash, the Eidim come late, so the Chachamim made the takana that you should be noyeg oisayim kodesh or lamacha kodesh. So there, I would think it's considered to be a vadai, but maybe not in Golos, far away. Why would they noyeg kodesh? Without that takana, they were noyeg kodesh mitzat sveika de yaima. So therefore, the chiddush of Rabbi Yosi is that regarding Rosh Hashanah, even outside of Eretz Yisrael, it's also considered to be one long day. Maybe that was what Rabbi Yosi was trying to say. So the Gemara says no. If that's what he was trying to say, shel golias. Why is he saying yomim tovim shel golias, which refers to other yomim tovim? He should have said bag goyla. He's talking about the same Rosh Hashanah as he was talking about before. It's just changing the location. We're not talking about Eretz Yisrael. We're talking about golas. That's mibayale. That's what he should have said. So it doesn't fit into what Rabbi Yosi was saying. It seems like Rabbi Yosi was saying, when you get to all Yamim Tovim, that it's one Kedusha. Ravasi says, no, I could still tell you that Rabbi Yosi was talking about Rosh Hashanah, Umay Kushya, Dilma Hachi Ka'amar. Maybe this is what Rabbi Yosi meant. V'chein haya Rabbi Yosi oise iser, shnei Yamim Tovim, shel Galiyais, ki shnei Yamim Tovim, shel Rosh Hashanah, lirabanan desharu. What Rabbi Yosi was saying is, just like the Rabbanan were matter regarding the Yom Tov Shel Rosh Hashanah, those that argued with him, and they were matter for Yom Tov Shel Rosh Hashanah, so too Rabbi Yosi was matter when they get to the Yom Tov Sheni Shel Galias. So we're being matchik over here. We're trying to squeeze the words of Rabbi Yosi. That he never meant to say that the Shnei Yomim Tovim Shel Gali is that we don't treat it as a Sveika de Yaima. It is a Sveika de Yaima. So Rashi explains, why is the Gemara being matchik the words of Rabbi Yosi to this extent? So the reason is because there's no pshat. It makes no sense why when you get to Yomim Tovim, all the other Yomim Tovim, that it should be considered like one long kedusha. It's a Sveika de Yaima. By Rosh Hashanah, there's a svara that it's a Yaima arichte. Chachamim made a takana that it's one long Yom Tov. But not over here when you get to other Yomim Tovim. So therefore we're being matchik the opinion of Rabbi Yosi. And Rashi adds another thing. The Gemara says, and we had this once, that Rabbi Yosi nimuka yimai. Rabbi Yosi, his halachas were very with reason, with a pshat. So especially according to Rabbi Yosi, Gemara is not understanding why would the 2 Yomim Tovim not be considered a Sveika de Yaima. Okay, so therefore the Gemara says that Rav Sheshis is chumrah, not to eat from this meat, based on Rabbi Yosi, is not necessarily true. Rabbi Yosi never meant to say this. Ashkeche Rav Sheshis l'Rabbi Bar Shmuel. Rav Sheshis found Rabbi Bar Shmuel. Omaleh, he asked him, Tanimar midi b'kedushais. Did you learn anything about the 2 kedushas of the 2 days of Yom Tov? Amalei Tanina. Yes, I learned in the Braisa. Maide Rabbi Yosi b'shnei Yamim Tovim shel Galiyas. He learned b'feidish that although regarding Rosh Hashanah, Rabbi Yosi was machmer, when he get to the 2 Yamim Tovim of any other Yamim Tovim, Rabbi Yosi was maide that it's a sveika de Yaima, and you can make this condition like Rabbi Yehuda said before. So he learned this b'feidish. The Rabbi Yosi is Maida. Amalei, so Rav Sheshis told Rabbi Bar Shmuel, if you find my friends, Rav Nachman and Rav Chiste, don't mention to them, don't tell them that there's a Befeidish Braisa that says this. He didn't want to be embarrassed, that there's a Befeidish Braisa that Rabbi Yosi says that it's okay, and he was being machmer for no reason. Amar Ravashi says, L'didi Amali Ameimar. Ameimer told me, Hahu Bar Tavya, that story with this deer that was captured on the first day of Yom Tov, La Vitsudi Itze, that actually, that wasn't the story, B'chlal. There was no deer that was captured. That was not the story at all. Ella, rather, what was the story? Bichutz L'tchum Asa. They brought it was on one day, it wasn't one day, the next day. It came, let's say, on the first day of Yom Tov, there was a deer that was brought from outside the Tchum. A guy brought it from outside the Tchum. Man the ochal, so those that ate it, Rav Nachman and Rav Chisda that ate the meat, Sava, they held, they're allowed to eat it, because the halacha regarding something that comes outside the tchum is, Haba b'shvil Yisrael zeh, if something was brought out of the tchum for one yid, mutter li Yisrael acher. That yid is not allowed to eat it, but another yid is allowed to eat it. Because the whole meaning of tchum is gzeirim b'derabbanon, so therefore they will make that another yid is allowed to eat it. Man the lo yachal, and Rav Sheshes, that did not eat it, Savar, he holds, called us Reish Galusa, because it was brought for the Reish Galusa that invites a lot of people to him. Adaita the Kulu Rabbanan Asi, it was brought for all the Rabbanan that are going to be invited to eat there. So it was brought. Rav Sheshes felt this was brought from out of the Tchum for me, directly for me. So therefore I'm not allowed to eat it. That was the whole basis of the machlokes between Rav Nachman and Rav Chisda and Rav Sheshes. Nothing to do with the whole subject of one day Yom Tov, another day Yom Tov. That was the story. So the Gemara asks, but didn't we say that v'ha ashkechei Rav Sheshes la Rabbi Bar Shmuel? Rav Sheshes asked Rabbi Bar Shmuel the whole question about what Rav Yossi holds. So we see that the story was about the 2 days of Yom Tov. V'amalei, and he answered, v'amalei, and he gave him the answer that really Rav Yossi said that it's okay. So the Gemara lo yhayu dvarim ha'olam. That whole story never happened. Interessant. The Gemara brings the story. You know, sometimes you say a story, you don't say the name. No, tells you the story, the name. It never happened.
Rumors.
Huh?
Rumors.
Yeah. Sagt the Gemara, hahu lifta. There was lifta, which is a kind of vegetable, turnip. The asil mechuza that was brought on Yom Tov by goyim out of the tchum. For people, it was brought there. So the question is, for who was it brought? Nafik Rava went out. Chazia the Chmisha. He saw that it's already getting wilting. Yeah, it's not fresh. So he allowed them to buy from it, to take from it. Why? Because that means that it wasn't cut today. If it was fresh cut today, so then it would be muktzah. It would be fresh and they wouldn't be allowed to use it. So he saw that it wasn't fresh cut today. It was brought from out of the tchum, and that's not a problem. Okay, so Shara Rava lemizba minay, Rava allowed, you mind closing the door there? So Rava allowed them to buy from it. Omar, he said, Havada mesmol nekra. This was definitely cut yesterday. Ma yomrit. Now what are you going to say? There's still another problem. It came from outside the tchum. Haba b'shvul Yisrael zeh, something that you bring for one yid from out of the tchum, mutter lechel Yisrael acher. It's mutter for a different yid, as we just said. And v'kol shkin hai da'adaita denachrim masa. This was brought for the goyim in the city. It wasn't brought for yidden b'chlal, so therefore the yidden are allowed to buy from it. That was Rava's psak. But then Kivin the chaza the kamafshi or maisi lahu. Then once the Yidden started buying, so the goyim saw they have more Yiddish customers, so they brought in more. They brought in more from out of the tchum, more of this lifta, this turnips. So then asalu. Then he says, then he asked it. He says he can't use it anymore because they're bringing it now, especially for the Yidden. Another story the Gemara says, Hanu Beiganono. There are people that are Beiganono. Beiganono, Rashi says, these are people that prepare the place for the chasanim and the kalas to be there. They used to have nice preparation of a room that they made it with basiligani. That's the whole, right, the ganuni, exactly. So they used to have the hadassim that they would put there. So there was these ganona, the gozul hu asa, that goyim cut hadassim b'yomtiv sheni, on yomtiv sheni. Lo'oretet, the next day after Yom Tiv, Sharalu Ravina Lo'iruchebe La'alter. Ravina allowed them to use it, to smell from these hadassim immediately, right after Yom Tiv. Amalei Rava bar Tachlife Ravina. So Rav bar Tachlife says to Ravina, Leiser Luhumar B'pnei Sheinam B'nei Torah. You should answer this. Don't allow them to use it because they're not B'nei Torah. And as Rashi says, if they're not B'nei Torah, you're going to be mad to this. They're going to come to be mezalzel in Yom Tov Sheni. They're going to think that the reason why I could use this because Goyim cut it in Yom Tov Sheni, so they're going to be mezalzel in Yom Tov Sheni. You should answer this. So the Gemara says, wait a minute. Amalei Maskefla Rav Shmaya. So Rav Shmaya asks on this, Time Adeinam B'nei Torah. The only reason this should be answered is because they're not B'nei Torah and you don't want them to make a mistake. Ha B'nei Torah, sorry, if they would be B'nei Torah Shari, it would be allowed. Va B'inon B'chdei Sheyasu. Something that a guy cut in Yontif, you can't allow La'alter immediately the next day. You have to wait B'chdei Sheyasu as long as it takes to cut this. Azlu Shailul Rava. they came and asked Rava this question. Namalu, he's right. This is not just for Amaratzim that they shouldn't be mezalzel, but a guy that does a malacha for you on Yontif, you can use it the next day, but only after B'chdei Sheyasu. Now we go back to the Mishnah and we discuss over here Negeh to Rosh Hashanah. So the Mishnah brought from Rab Daisa, so he said that in Rosh Hashanah you have to mention Rosh Chodesh as well. And when you mention Rosh Chodesh, you say, if today is Rosh Chodesh, or if not, tomorrow is Rosh Chodesh. Right? What was the exact lashon of the Mishnah? You say, Hachlitzenu b'yom Rosh Chodesh hazeh, im hayom or im l'machar. If today it is, and if not, it's tomorrow. Okay. Talk to Gemara. Amar Rabba. When we walk by Ravona, he asked us the question, do you mention Rosh Chodesh in the davening on Rosh Hashanah? Kivin de chalukim b'musafin amrinon, since there's a separate carbon musaf for Rosh Chodesh, even in Rosh Hashanah in the Beis HaMikdash, so therefore you mention it separately. There's the karbanis for Rosh Hashanah and there's the karbanis for Rosh Chodesh. When you say Yom HaZikaron Hazeh, that lashon of Yom HaZikaron goes on both Rosh Hashanah and also on Rosh Chodesh. As Rashi here says, the Torah calls Sai Rosh Hashanah Yom HaZikaron, Zichron Trua, and also Rosh Chodesh it says V'haya Lechem L'Zikaron. So therefore there's one lashon of Zikaron for both. That's the shaila. Amalon. So he answered us Tinisua. This we learned this in the Mishnah here because Rab Deisa said that in Rosh Hashanah you do mention Rosh Chodesh. My love lahasker. Don't you think? And what did it say afterwards in the Mishnah? That Chachamim argued on this. Chachamim disagreed to this. Right? So Chachamim say you don't mention. My lav lahaske. Don't you think that what did the Chachamim argue about regarding mentioning Rosh Chodesh? So we pass like the Chachamim that you don't mention Rosh Chodesh. So the Gemara says, "Loi, not necessarily. That's not necessarily what the Chachamim argued about." Lahasnais. What they argued is on this condition that you add. You say if today is Rosh Chodesh, if tomorrow is Rosh Chodesh, is that they argued about? And we see this as well in a Braisa. Rab Daisa would do the same thing on every Rosh Chodesh during the entire year. He would make this condition. If Rosh Chodesh was a mitzad esfeik de yaime, so he would make this condition. If today is Rosh Chodesh, if tomorrow is Rosh Chodesh, so he would do the same thing every Rosh Chodesh. And the Chacham would not agree to him. So we see that the issue that Chacham wore Maida is about making this condition. If the Chachamim argued mitzad this Tnai that they didn't agree to this, therefore by every Rosh Chodesh they didn't agree. You're going to say that the pshat in our mission is that they didn't agree to mention Rosh Chodesh. Why didn't they agree to him b'negeh to Rosh Chodesh? Of course you have to mention Rosh Chodesh in a regular Rosh Chodesh. Now, so the Gemara asks, wait a minute, but the question is really the other way around. You're going to tell me that the argument of the Chachamim in our Mishnah was only regarding the condition, not b'negeh to mentioning Rosh Chodesh? So if so, the question is the opposite. Why do the Chachamim have to argue twice? Why do they have to argue b'negeh to Rosh Hashanah and also b'negeh to Rosh Chodesh all year? It's the same machlokes whether you make this condition or not. So maybe Adarabah, there should be a raya from here that in our Mishnah the argument was about whether you mention Rosh Chodesh and Rosh Hashanah, and the Braisa the argument is about whether you say this condition or not. So the Gemara, no, I could tell you it's tzricha. There's a chiddush here in the Braisa. If we would only have the Mishnah that they argued regarding making this condition in Rosh Hashanah, only in Rosh Hashanah Rabbanan say don't make this condition. Mishum the asil is a zulibe. You're going to come to be mezalzel in Yontif. You're saying such a condition, so you're going to be mezalzel in the kedusha of the Yontif. But all year round, there's no issue of being mezalzel in a yomtiv. Maybe the Rab Daisa, maybe they're going to be made to Rab Daisa that there's no issue of making a condition. And the same thing, the opposite. If we would only say the Braisa, I would say Baha Kam Rab Daisa. Only in the Braisa Rab Yossi allows for this condition because there's no yomtiv you being mezalzel in. But in our Mishnah, and he agrees to the Rabbanah that you don't make this condition. So therefore, tzricha. Therefore, we need both the Mishnah and the Braisa. And the truth is, as the Mefarshim point out, even Rab Daisa himself says, you don't always make this condition. You only make this condition when you mention Rosh Chodesh. When you mention Rosh Hashanah, you don't make this condition. If today is Rosh Hashanah, if tomorrow is Rosh Hashanah, because even Rab Daisa is Meide, there is an issue of a person coming to be Mezalzel in Yontif. Okay, but basically the Gemara didn't really solve the shayla over here. Do you, according to the Chachamim, do you mention Rosh Chodesh on Rosh Hashanah or not? Zok the Gemara Meisvei, I'll ask you a question from a Braisa. If you're going to say that you do mention Rosh Chodesh and Rosh Hashanah, I have the following question. Rosh Hashanah Shechali is b'Shabbos. The Braisa says Rosh Hashanah falls out in Shabbos. B'Sham Yomim Mispalel Eser. By the Musaf, you daven 10 brachas. What are the 10 brachas? So as Rashi says, there's the 3 in the beginning, the 3 in the end, and then it fell out on Shabbos, so you have to have a bracha for Shabbos. And then you have Malchias, Achraynis, and Shofris. And part of Malchias, you also say the Yom Tif of the day, the Rosh Hashanah. But then, okay, so that's how many? There's 10 brachas. Okay. Now Beis Hillel Aimer Mispalel Teisha. Beis Hillel say there's only 9 brachas because Hillel holds you don't mention a separate bracha for Shabbos. Like we do today, you include the bracha of Shabbos in the bracha of Yom Tov as well. If you're going to tell me that you have to mention Rosh Chodesh on Rosh Hashanah, Beis Shammai, according to Beis Shammai, just like for Shabbos you have to have a separate bracha, you should have to have a separate bracha for Rosh Chodesh as well, and you would be 11 brachas. So why did Beis Shammai only say 10 brachas? Rab Zera says no. Shabbos you have to mention separately, but Rosh Chodesh is different. Shani Rosh Chodesh mitoich shekaylo l'shachris va'arves kaylo nami b'musofen. Just like we do b'negei to Rosh Chodesh by shachris. Ma'ariv on Shabbos. What do we do? Do we say a separate bracha for Rosh Chodesh? No, we include it in Ya'alav Yavai, in Ritzei. So just like you kailel it together in another bracha, so too Beis Shammai would say that you kailel, even if you do have to mention Rosh Chodesh on Rosh Hashanah, but you kailel it in Musaf together with the bracha of Shabbos. Fragt the Gemara, wait a minute, is this true? Umi islay leBeis Shammai, lehu Beis Shammai kailel. Does Beis Shammai b'chlal hold of this whole thing that Rosh Chodesh, you mention Rosh Chodesh and you include it in another bracha? V'atanya, we learned in the Braisa, Rosh Chodesh shechali is b'Shabbos. Rosh Chodesh falls out on Shabbos. What do? Beis Shammai yomrim mispal shmeina. You add an extra bracha. Every Shabbos the 7 brachas. Beis Shammai says no, you add an extra bracha. Or Beis Hillel omer mispal sheva. Beis Hillel say that you only daven 7 brachas. So we see that Beis Shammai holds you always mention Rosh Chodesh separately. So this goes back to the previous Braisa. Why did it say only 10 brachas? If you have to mention Rosh Chodesh according to Beis Shammai, there should have been an 11th bracha. Kasha. So this taka remains a question. The Gemara doesn't answer this. Huh? A kasha, no, it's a kasha if we're going to say that you have to mention Rosh Chodesh on Rosh Hashanah, even according to the Chachamim, so then it's a kasha on the Pshat of the Braisa before in Shittis Beis Shammai. Why does it say only 10 brachas and not 11 brachas? The Gemara is not finished yet with this Indian. So the Gemara says, "V'kailul atzmai tanoihi." This that we said before regarding Rosh Chodesh, that you include it. You include it in the. Now the Gemara is talking about Shachris and Ma'ariv and Rosh Chodesh. It falls out in Shabbos. And you include Rosh Chodesh in another bracha. So there's a machlokes tanoim of how this is done. The Tanya we learned in the Braisa. Shabbos shechali is b'Rosh Chodesh. Shabbos falls out in Rosh Chodesh. B'chayla shel Moed or on Chol Moed. So what do? Arv is Shachris and Mincha. Mispal kedar koi sheva. You only say 7 brachas. It's Shabbos. Shabbos you always say 7 brachas. V'oime me'ena me'ura ba'aveda. And where do you say? Where do you mention Rosh Chodesh in the bracha of Aveda, which is the bracha of Ritzei, like we do? Rabbi Eliezer says B'Haidah. You mention Rosh Chodesh in the bracha of Maidim. V'im la yamar, if you forgot to say Ya'alav Yavim, achzir noisi, you have to daven over again. Or b'musafim, when it comes to Musaf, maschil b'shal Shabbos, or Messiah b'shal Shabbos. So over here, in Musaf, you don't say Ya'alav Yavai, but you start the bracha with Shabbos, you conclude with Shabbos, and v'oime kedushas hayom b'emtza, and you also include the kedushas hayom of Rosh Chodesh. You talk about Rosh Chodesh as well in the bracha on Shabbos. Shimon ben Gamliel, Rabbi Shmuel ben Neish, Rabbi Yechanan ben Breika Imrim, they say, Kol mokim shezakuk l'sheva, not only Musaf, any of the tefillas of Shabbos, in other words, also Ma'ariv, Shachris, Mincha, all of the tefillas of Shabbos, and you're davening 7 brachas, Maschil b'shal Shabbos, or Messiah b'shal Shabbos, v'oim b'kedushas hayom b'emtza. You mention Rosh Chodesh like you do in Musaf, in the bracha where you mention Shabbos, and not like we say today, Ya'alav Yavai in the Ritzei. That's their opinion. So we see over here different shittas in how you kailel Rosh Chodesh in the davening. And only according to Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Yechanan ben Breika, you kailel it in the bracha together with Shabbos. Now the Gemara goes back and says, Ma havi Allah. What's the halacha b'payil b'negei to mentioning Rosh Chodesh on Rosh Hashanah? Do we mention Rosh Chodesh on Rosh Hashanah or not? Rav Chisda says, Zikarin echad oile lekan lekan. You say Yom HaZikaron Hazeh, and that goes for Rosh Chodesh and for Rosh Hashanah. You don't mention Rosh Chodesh separately. V'chein Omer Rabbe Zikaron Echad Oileloi Lekan Lekan. You just mentioned Yom HaZikaron Hazeh. So just to finish off with one point, from the whole discussion of this Gemara, the shaila is, should you mention Rosh Chodesh or not? But l'chayre, if you mention it, there's nothing wrong. The fact is, there is a Musaf of Rosh Chodesh on Rosh Hashanah, so you could mention it separately. The shaila is that you have to. Or could it be included in the Yom HaZikaron that goes on both? But there are in Rishonim that explain that you shouldn't mention it, because if you mention Rosh Chodesh, Taisus over here brings from the Aruch in the end that he says that it's a Chodesh, it's a Chag Shah Chodesh Miskasebay, Bakesel Yom Chagenu. So therefore, you're not supposed to mention Rosh Chodesh. It's Rosh Hashanah today. It's not Stam Rosh Chodesh. So there's an Indian dafka not to mention Rosh Chodesh. And then there's also the famous reason not to mention Rosh Chodesh on Rosh Hashanah. It's one of the things that we do to confuse the Satan. You shouldn't know the date in the calendar, so therefore we don't mention Rosh Chodesh. So it's dafka an Indian not to mention on Rosh Hashanah, which is on Rosh Chodesh.
We do say Mulvad.
Right, the Mulvad, correct, which is also a discussion, by the way, in Taisus over here. How about the psukim? Here we're discussing Benegeh to mentioning Rosh Chodesh, but how about the psukim of the Musafim? Should you mention the psukim of the Musafim? So there's a few shittas and taisis, whether you should mention it, whether you shouldn't mention it. And B'Payel we do like this hachra, that we don't mention the psukim, but we say Milvad Oides Rosh Chodesh. Yeah.
What does that mean?
That B'Pashtus it means that the moon is not seen on the Rosh Chodesh, which is every Rosh Chodesh, but it also means that because it's Rosh Hashanah, so we cover the fact that it's Rosh Chodesh. We just blow shofar and mention that it's the Rosh of the entire year. Let's go a little weiter. Now the Gemara discusses weiter when we get to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, when we get to making a Shechayonu. Sagt the Gemara, when I was by Ravuna, boy alone, we had the question, do you have to say a Shechayonu on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? Should you say, Kiven the Mizman Lezman Asi, since it comes from time to time, Amrinan. So therefore we say this bracha. Aydilme Kiven the Loi Ikru Regalim, because it's not called a regal. The Torah refers to the other Yomim Tovim as Shalish Regalim. But this is not called a regal, Loi Amrinan, so we don't say it. Loi Avi Biyade, he didn't have the answer to this question. Ki Asoi Be Rav Yudah Amar, when they came to Rav Yudah said, Ano, Akra, Chadete. You here for slichas?
Yeah.
Right next door. In the next door over there. Ano akro chadete nami aminas man. I would say shechayanu even if I'm eating a new cabbage that I didn't eat. So I say I say that even on a new cabbage. So therefore, you have a big shaila if you could say a zman for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. It's a new Yom Tiv and it's something that comes mizman lezman. You could say it on it if you want. Amalei. So he says to him rishus. Like kami bayili. I'm not asking if you could say shechayana. You could say shechayana. Ki kami bayili chayva. My question is, do I have a chayva to say shechayana? This is one of the unique things about the bracha of shechayana, which Alter Rebbe also brings in the Siddur, that shechayana is a bracha that you say for a simcha that you have on something. So shechayana, if a person has a simcha in something, and something new and something that he wants to thank the Eibusher for this, there's a reshus to say a shechayana for it. So therefore, on a new Yom Tiv, even if it's Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, you can say. But his shaila was, is there a chiyuv to say Shechayana? Amalei, Rav Shmuel Damri Tarvayus, Rav and Shmuel both said, Einoy Mizman Ela B'Shalosh Shagalim. You only say Shechayanu on Shalosh Shagalim, not in Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. That's what Rav and Shmuel said. Meisveh, the Gemara asks a question on this. There's a pasuk that says in Ke'eles, 10 chelik l'shivat, give the Eibishter a portion from 7 days, v'gam l'shmoina, give the Eibishter a portion from 8 days. What is this referring to? What's the 7 and 8? Rabbi Eliezer Shiva Eluzayim Bereishis. There's the 7 days of creation, and you give the Eibishter the 7th day Shabbos, one portion. Shmoina Elu Chesyim Mila, the 8th day of a person that's born, you give the Eibishter the bris. That's Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. Rabbi Shua Shiva Elu Shiva Yimei Pesach. It refers to the days of Pesach. Shmoina Elu Shmoina Yimei Achag. That one of these days or 2 of these days is Yom Tov that you give to the Eibishter. Okishuayme V'gam. In the pasuk it also says a lashon V'gam. V'gam l'shmeina. What's gam coming to add? So Rabbi Yeshua said, l'rabbis, atzeres, shvuos, Rosh Hashanah, and Yom Kippur. My love, l'gabi, what is he adding that atzeres, Rosh Hashanah, and Yom Kippur? You're giving the Eibishter a chelik. What's the chelik you're giving the Eibishter? La, don't you think l'zman? Isn't the comparison l'gabi the bracha of Shechayanu? That you make a bracha of Shechayanu even in Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur as well? It's like the Gemara loy, not necessarily, l'bracha. It means b'nigeya to the bracha. You make a special bracha. I mean, davening, we say mekadesh Yisrael v'azmanim. It means a special bracha that we make on the Yom Tov, but not necessarily the Shechayanu. Hochanami mistavra. And this makes sense. If you're going to say it refers to the fact that you make a bracha shachayanu zman kol shiva miyike. Is there a bracha of shachayanu all 7 days? It says ten chelik l'shiva. Give the Eibishter a portion in these 7 days. So Rabbi Yeshua taish that it refers to all 7 days. There's no shachayanu all 7 days, so it can't be talking about shachayanu. And what it says, no, that's not a raya. Hale kashya, that's not a question. The iloi mevarach idne mevarach lamachra. Shachayanu, you don't make it again every one of the 7 days, but it is it's shayach, possible to each one of the 7 days. If you didn't make it in the beginning, you make it one of the other days. And on another day, till the last day, you can make a bracha shachayanu. No, but it still can't apply to all of the days. By being on kais, you have to have a kais to make shachayanu. So you don't have a kais on the other days to make a shachayanu. If you're going to say that we're talking about shachayanu, this would be a raya to Rav Nachman. That when you make shachayanu, you actually don't need a kais. If you remind yourself and you're outside in the marketplace, you can make a shachayanu even without a kais. So the Gemara halekashya. That's not a question. The ikla kais, he could be on the 7 days. He could be. He does have a kais. It's not going to be a raya to what Rav Nachman said that you can make a shachayanu without a kais. This bracha over here that it says shiva, maybe it's with a kais. The Gemara says no. There still is a raya here because you can make a bracha of shachayanu with a kais on Shavuos and on Rosh Hashanah. But Yom Kippurim, if you're going to say that this brayso which mentioned Yom Kippur as well, and it's talking about shachayanu, how are you going to make a shachayanu with a kais on Yom Kippur? If you're going to make the bracha, so he's going to make the bracha before Shkia, right? So he's going to make a bracha shachayanu for Yom Kippur, and he's going to drink from it. You're not allowed to. Even the moment he said shachayanu for Yom Kippur, kibla alei, he already accepted Yom Kippur, the Yom Tov of Yom Kippur upon himself. And he's not allowed to drink the wine. The Ha'amalei Rabbi Yirmiyah Barabba said L'Rav, mi budless. He saw him davening, so he asked him, so did you already separate from the chayil? Did you already accept Shabbos upon yourself? V'amalei in badilna, yes, if I already davened, in the davening itself, because I davened, I already accepted Shabbos upon myself. Okay, so therefore, how are you going to make shachayanu on Yom Kippur if you're going to tell me that you need a kais? So the Gemara says, maybe there's another solution. Livrech alei v'lenchay. You can make the bracha on the kais, when you don't drink it, you put it down. But you're not allowed to do that. The halacha is when you make the bracha, you have to be tayyim for the of the kais. Rashi says, otherwise it's a gnai for the kais. You're making a bracha on the wine. The whole thing is the chshivus of the shachayanu, and then you just leave the wine there. So you have to be tayyim from it. So the Gemara says, what? There's another solution to this. Give it to a child to drink. Gemara says, no, we can't do this. Less hilchas Ravache. We don't paskin like Ravache that says that you can give it to a child. Because if you make it a custom every single year that you give, everybody has a cup of wine in front of them Yom Kippur. The whole shul has a cup of wine, and you give it to a child. So you have all the children drinking wine. So the child might come and continue this behavior even when he becomes a bar mitzvah. So you're not allowed to do this. So Bekitza, the Gemara says that if you're going to include Yom Kippur, you see from here that Yom Kippur, you make a shachayanu, you don't need a kais. But we didn't really answer our main question, do you b'chlal make a shachayanu on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? Rav and Shmuel said you don't. And we don't really have a raya from this brayso. Ma'yavi Allah, what's the answer? What's the halacha? Shadru Rabbana le Rav Yemer Saba. Rabbanan sent Rav Yemer Saba Kamei de Rav Chisda. They sent him to Rav Chisda. B'mayla Yemer de Rei Shata. They sent him Erev Rosh Hashanah to Rav Chisda. Amru le Zil Chazi Heichi Ovid Uvda. Go see what he does. Does he make a shachayanu or not? And ta Eimalan. And come and report to us what happened. Ki Chazye, when Rav Chisda saw Rav Yemer Sava came to him, Rav Yemer Sava means he was an older person, and he came to him, Amalei, he told him, he said this mashal, Dal Yual Retive Rafse, Lei Beduchte, they picked up a moist piece of wood from its place, and isolate, and you brought it, Dal Yual Retive Rafse, Lei beduchte, that's supposed to be in its place, and they took this moist piece of wood and brought it. What's this mashal? You have a moist piece of wood, it can't be used for a fire. So what are you bringing it here? There has to be epis of purpose. So he's hinting to Rav Yemer Sava, you're here epis for a reason. What mit did you come here for? What happened? Aisule kasa de chamre. They brought Rav Chiste a cup of wine on Rosh Hashanah. Kaddish, he made kiddush v'amazman, and he said shachayanu. The hilchase, so the halacha is oymezman. He say a shachayanu on Rosh Hashanah, in Rosh Hashanah b'yom Kippurim, and the hilchase, and the halacha also is zman oymre filu b'shuk. You make the brach of shachayanu even without any wine. That's the conclusion of the Gemara, and that's how we do, of course, today. So just to repeat the vart that the Rebbe says in the Sikha, benegay to this Gemara, that the Gemara started off with one svara. When the Gemara over here said, who was it? Rav Yehuda said, I make a shachayanu even on a new cabbage. What the Gemara was trying to say is that maybe on a Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, there's also an inyan of simcha. Shana and Yom Kippur is taka not sholish regalim, which is mad, which is an inyan of simcha. But he said, no, maybe yeah. If it comes mizman lizman and it's something new to the person, just like a new cabbage could be simcha, a Shana Yom Kippur could also be simcha. That was his svara. But the Gemara retracts from that. The maskana of the Gemara is the reason you make a shachayanu on a Shoshana Yom Kippur has nothing to do with the simcha. The simcha is sholish regalim. The reason you make a shachayanu is the Yom Tif itself requires a shachayanu. Just like there's other mitzvahs on Yom Tif, not mitzvah the simcha shabbai. The very zman of a new Yom Tif requires to thank the Eibishter and make a shachayanu without the simcha shabbai. It's a different type of shachayanu. There's a shachayanu on a new fruit. There's a shachayanu on simcha, but this is a shachayanu that the Yom Tov itself requires. That's the maskana of the Gemara. Huh? Mizman lizman. Just, but no, mizman lizman actually, again, mizman lizman emphasizes that it's new, simcha. The very zman, the Yom Tov is a zman meyucha to thank the Eibishter. We thank the Eibishter for giving us this Yom Tov. The special mitzvahs that we have to do this Yom Tov, and there's a bracha that we thank the Eibishter for this Yom Tov. Not mitzvah the simcha shabbai. It's a different inyan. It's a sikh and chelik lamed zayin. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Or even if it would be more often. Yeah. Okay. Huh? Yeah, Achashal Pesach in chelik lamed zayin. Okay.